invite you to take your Bibles, please, and turn to Joshua, the 5th chapter. In verses 13 to the remainder of that chapter, we had a question that I wanted to add one more detail to it. By appearance, Joshua saw a man, didn't he? It was an angel of Jehovah, of the host of Jehovah's army, spiritual army, but he saw a man, so his first response, are you for us or against us? He has a sword in his hand. Then he realized that he's addressing himself as the authoritative angel from God, from the host, the prince of those angels before God. And so that's when Joshua hits the ground and worships. He didn't say he worshiped an angel. He said he worshiped. And what do you see that's interesting here that was interesting in Moses' day? That's the point I wanted to hit at this evening before we go further. Remove your shoes, you're on holy ground. God said that while the angel is in the midst of the burning bush. But he's speaking to God. God is speaking to him. And on that occasion, we'll find that he realizes that this is God speaking, and he appeals to him as God. And that's what we're seeing here, I think, with Joshua. He's told to do the same thing as Moses, who went before him, did in leading the people. He's on holy ground. And take off your shoes, and that's kind of ends this as we go into taking of Jericho. And what's going to be interesting is that here they'll take Jericho. They're going to have a little problem with Ai, and they should not have done that. But what's the problem? They weren't holy people. All through his God is showing my people foremost needs to be holy. And if they're not holy, I'm not going to be with them. I'm not going to be helping them achieve what I promised they could have. And it just shows you how important the holiness is when the Hebrew writer says, have peace with all men, but you can't eliminate being sanctified. You have to have that's more important than peace with men. Being set apart unto God. Not how to set apart unto God, this is the way I think you ought to be. I'm holy. No, you're going to be holy as God is holy. He's the standard. And we'll find that he cannot tolerate sin. And that's what happens a little bit later. But here we're looking at Jericho as he then goes into this, around this city. They come from Gilgal. They're heading a little bit west. They come through the Jordan River. And here they're going to be surrounding Jericho. And so what all led the people around the walls of the city of Jericho? You have a picture about what led them around. What's an important part of the furniture that is led around? Ark of the Covenant. That's always the presence of God. In the wilderness, they would set up their tabernacle. They would have the most holy place and the holy place, and the outside, those places we have in our mind's eye now of the burnt offering and all of those things when they set up their camp. Then they would tear it down and move to the next place. 42 different places we learned in Numbers. Over 42 different places they settled during that 38-year period in the wilderness as far as Numbers is concerned. Totaling 40 years that they had. And now they're coming into the land in which was promised where they could eventually set up their tabernacle with David and temple with Solomon as the years roll by. So this was a part of God's presence there. All right. What did you also have going around the city with the Ark of the Covenant? Is anybody carrying the Ark of the Covenant, or do they think they took a cart this time? The priest. Always to carry the Ark. And so we're doing that. So who else is going around? I barely hear you. Army men. Army men. And they're just in the rear, or they're just in the front? Doesn't matter. It matters with us. In the front, preceding the other men, or 7 priests that are blowing the trumpets. Ark of the Covenant, before all of them is a forward army, and the rear part is an army. And that's who is going around the city. And God had commanded his people not to speak a word. They are to shout until the day that I tell you to shout. then you will shout. But what would Jericho be listening to as they go around the city? What would they be listening to? They would hear something. The trumpets. They would be blasting the trumpets. And there would not be soldiers speaking. There would not be any other sound other than that. So how many times does that happen? You go around it one time, right? Once a day for how many days? 6 days. Now you're in the city of Jericho, and of course it already is an interesting place because the city gates are shut. Nobody's going in, nobody's going out. Soldiers ain't coming out. They're not coming out there. It's shut down. Here they've heard, here's the people coming, and here's their history behind them. And they've got one lady in that particular town, Jericho, who has already made her way that she's going to be saved based upon an oath, based upon God who considers oaths very important. She's putting her trust in God that she's going to be the one that's alive with her family. But it's shut down. And it's to the point that God says, see, I've already given you the city. Why wouldn't commerce be going around if you didn't care about, these people are nothing. Your commerce will be taken care of. Your soldiers might be ready to go out and keep them from coming, but it is shut down tight. And God says, see, I've given you the city. Still standing. And they don't have a catapult. They don't have things that they can tear a mighty wall down in Jericho. They're just going to have swords, and they're walking around, they're marching around the city just one time a day, going back to their camp, and all I hear is 7 trumpets blowing. Now you do that the second day, and you do that the third day, and you do that the fourth day. And I don't know what these people are doing out here, but it's strange, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be big a deal. But that's who's going around the temple. Now, around the city of Jericho. Now, question 14, how many times were Israelites to compass the city of Jericho? Be 13 times, wouldn't it? 6, 7th, go one time plus 6 more. And so, in total, there'll be 13 times before, and all of a sudden the wall's going to come down. So there's that 6 days, and you just kind of dull them into that. And the 7th day, they march around 7 times. They compass the city. And if you just read right through this, you may not pick this up. Sometimes we will do that. He had told them emphatically, do not speak until I tell you to speak. On that day, when I tell you to speak, you shout. And so he's told them when the long blast of the trumpet, singular, when that long blast of the trumpet, whether that's going to be the combination of one single voice from all 7, but it's going to be that long blast we see here in chapter 6. When that long blast, you shout. But they shout before that, because he told them to shout. He tells them that here the city belongs to you. And it came to pass on that day, which is the 7th day, came to pass when the priests blew the trumpets, plural, Joshua said to the people, shout, for Jehovah hath given you the city. And in the midst of telling them to do that, in the midst of, they're going to be victorious, and he said, the city shall be devoted, even it is all theirs to Jehovah. Only Rahab the harlot shall live. She and all that are with her in the house, because also she hid the messengers that we sent. Time and time again. Why is she delivered? Because she protected, she hid the messengers that were sent. She not only received the spies, she protected them and hid them. But as for you, only keep yourselves from the devoted thing, lest ye have devoted it. That's when you have devoted it, you take of the devoted thing, so would you make the camp of Israel accursed and trouble it. But all the silver, gold, vessels of brass and iron are holy unto Jehovah, and they shall come the treasury of the people. So the people shouted. When he told them to shout, here's what's about to be taking place, they shouted. And the priests blew the trumpets, and it came to pass when the people heard the sound of the trumpet that the people shouted with great shout. And that's when what happened? The walls came down. The walls fell down flat before them, so they could go into the city instead of falling out. It falls inward, so they could just walk right on in the city. Every man before himself. There wasn't this part that wasn't breached. It's everything. Probably where Rahab's house was, it didn't fall down flat. But that part of the wall, everybody went straight in, which is just a miraculous event that's taking place. And they utterly destroyed all that was in the city, both man and woman, both young and old, ox and sheep, and donkey with the edge of the sword. And then we have the redemption of Rahab's family. So it appears to be here they're shouting, but there's that loud shout that's demonstrative of that long trumpet blast. That's when the walls will fall down flat. But they didn't speak a word in those 6 days when they were going around once a day. And that's what God commanded them to do. So with all of this, as we take it of a principle and we start looking at it from that standpoint, what led to the walls of Jericho falling in place? Falling down in place where they could go into the city. Was it God's grace? Well, yeah, God's grace. I have given you the city. That's how, don't you see? It's all shut down. Nobody's going to go out against you. See, I've given you the city. And so we can say, well, that's God's gift. That's God's grace. Was it Israel's faith? The walls of Jericho, by faith, the walls of Jericho fell down, Hebrews 11:30. By faith, and no, by God's grace. God's faith, by faith in God, the walls of Jericho fell down after it was encompassed about. So they completed that. Well, was that Israel's obedience? Was that involved? When did it fall down? After they obeyed God's word and God's will. And so was it God's grace coupled with Israel's faith? I trust in you, God, and therefore they come down. We got scripture saying no, it was after they went around it 7 times. Just like when was the man cleansed in the Jordan River? Dipped how many times? Yeah, 4.5, he came up pretty clean. No. He did exactly what God said to do. And there was indeed disobedience. Is it F? Where it's God's grace and Israel's obedience and no faith is involved? I'll do exactly what you say, God. Thank you for your gift. I'll do exactly what you say. And you have no trust in God. He's just going to do what he says. You have that kind of relationship with him? No. It's got to be A, B, and C. It's got to be all 3. And it took Israel's obedience to be saved by God's grace. In this case, to have Jericho. And they were bring the walls down. They didn't have a lot of army equipment to do that. No bombs, nothing to throw stones at. But the walls came down and they all went in before them and utterly destroyed that city. And therefore, we'll see more about the damage done to that. But that's a wonderful principle all through the Bible. You're not saved by grace alone, by faith alone, in Christ alone, as the Calvinists teach. And then they start, well, if you don't have works of obedience, you can't be saved. But they don't put baptism in that. They just put after you become saved already. So they have their own way of looking at it. But the point is that here was God's gift. And you weren't going to do that by shouting and marching around it, blowing a trumpet. That was God's grace. And he encouraged them to say, see, they're already half whipped now. They don't even want, they can't come, they're afraid of you. Go get them. And I've given you the city. And it took faith to say, we'll do exactly what God said. Yes, second day, third day, fourth day, fifth. Oh, here we go. And then we'll do it 7 times. They trusted in God. They did exactly what he told them to do. That's why those things came about. It's all that's working together. God gave his son so all men could be saved. But until we obey the gospel, we can't have our sins cleansed by the gift of his son. And that is obedience of faith. He that believeth and is baptized shall be saved. That's not earning anything. That's not denying God's grace. It's not cheapening faith or making it works-oriented, that I deserve this and I'm going to work my way to heaven. No. It's trusting in God and his promises and doing exactly what he said to do. Wonderful way to teach our neighbors about the plan of salvation. There's some other examples. Naaman the leopard, so forth, is good about that. Hebrews 11:30 is the great chapter on faith, and yet it tells us what kind of faith that is. Any thoughts?
Well, it's certainly a direct parallel of what it takes for us in obedience. But many times the Lord did that in illustrating a point like this, or a story, to show that we need to follow exact on all the requirements, whether it be our obedience, our worship, our marriages, whatever it be.
Yeah.
There's an exact pattern, and you must follow, or it's just a story.
Yeah. That's true.
What's also interesting is nowhere in, unless I overlooked it, in Joshua 6 does it say, and the people have faith. All it tells us is they obey exactly what God said, and if we see revealed in Hebrews, that we can see their faith because of their obedience. And so we talk, in James about an obedient faith. We don't, your faith with your work shows that you had that faith. Otherwise, what good is it?
My works, I'll show you my faith. James, that's good. That's exactly the point he makes there too. All right. Question number 16. What was saved among the inhabitants of the city of Jericho? Now, you actually say who, but let's just say what was saved. Well, they saved some things that we're going to dedicate unto God, and we'll talk about that in a moment, that they took out of there. Gold and silver, vessels of brass and iron. Those were things that were there. They took that out among the inhabitants of the city of Jericho, and they put it in the treasury of Jehovah. No, that's dirty stuff. That's heathen stuff. Gold and silver, vessels of brass and iron, they're putting in to the house of Jehovah to be used. But the ox and the cattle and all those things, they indeed were burnt with fire. So along of those who were saved was Rahab. We see that taking place. Who did Joshua send in to save them? The two young men that came, the spies, and that the young men, the spies went in. They weren't older men; they were young, and they brought out Rahab, her father, her mother, her brethren, that's her brothers and sisters, and all that she had. All her kindred also were brought out. If I was a third cousin to Rahab and said, "Hey, can I come in your room tonight? Can you house us up? We're family." I said, "I hadn't seen you in a long time." But all the kindred connected were going to be in her house. And we already been told, if you get out of that house, all that oath is not going to be given, is not given to save you. But God had saved them by an oath and a promise, and they fulfilled that. They're the ones that come. I'm sure that scarlet thread was in the window in which they were let down. They knew exactly where to go. And they took all that she had, all her kindred, and they brought out, and they set them without the camp of Israel. And then they burnt the city with fire, and all was therein. The silver and gold, the vessels of brass and iron, they put in the treasury of the house of Jehovah. They've had a treasury, didn't they? And that treasury was in the house of Jehovah. It's where they accumulated the money they're going to be used to pay the workers to keep things up and so forth. But Rahab the harlot and her father's household and all that she had did Joshua save alive. And she dwelt in the midst of Israel unto this day. Why? Because she's a harlot. And God loves sinners. And he's going to save them. No, she acted upon her faith. She hid the messengers. She's not commended for lying, telling something that's not true. She's commended for hiding them and not giving them up. And so, well, I'll put something that will take away that lying part. But she hid the messenger. She received them and she hid them, whom Joshua sent out to spy out Jericho, just like the king said, that's why they're here. He was right. That's why Joshua sent them. And Joshua charged them with an oath at that time, saying, cursed be the man before Jehovah that riseth up and builds this city. And we'll talk about that in a few moments. So that's what was saved. Other than that was burnt to the ground. And God is going to, Joshua's going to add to that. Now question, what was devoted to Jehovah? And some of our translations have the word accursed. Don't take the accursed thing. Then some say, well, it's the devoted thing. Why does that work together? Because it's devoted to God. If you take it, you're going to be accursed. And that's what happens. When people, that's what we're going to see the whole 7th chapter about that with Achan. So that would be that, and he already told them when they shouted, here they're going to have that victory. He said, verse 18, keep yourselves from the devoted thing, gold, silver, those things, and we're going to see Achan took another thing, but part that could be devoted to God. They were to take that, or they would have trouble, and Achan and his family are going to see what trouble is, and they're going to see what trouble is in Ai before it's all over. So that was devoted to God. So what would happen? And we've already, and this is a what if, but you sometimes think, well, God was pretty harsh on Achan. It's pretty tough, and on him. But let's say God had not spoken about plundering, because you go back to warfare then, and we're going to see it in Ai. He's going to allow the people to plunder them of their riches, but he doesn't here in Jericho. And his things are devoted unto Jehovah, and that's the way it's going to be. Let's say no. Let's let him go. And so you got people like Achan, and then everybody. They'd be going through and taking all sorts of things. Canaan was a very prosperous area. People had riches, had gold, silver, had land, had property. They're just going to take over all of that. And what type of greed and what type of people would it have been so it'd be so easy? Gold, silver. What does Achan take besides gold and silver? Beautiful garment from Babylon. Babylonish garment, mantle. It's beautiful clothes. And he said, let's get what we can. What is it like in our country when people go in and plunder when cities are on fire? What's that like? Television here, get this and that. We don't have anybody coming to get us. Let's go get it. Would the people be really dedicated unto God? Or they hide it from the neighbor in their tent? And this is what we got out of it. God deliberately set forth them and made it a point holy unto God. This belongs to me, not you. I'm going to give you, I've already promised you the land. You're going to have these cities. Of course, Jericho is going to be burnt to the ground here. But you're going to take over them. But he wanted that all burned down. It belongs to God, the devoted thing, which we see him taking that. We'll see what we know that's in there. But he adds that garment, probably a beautiful garment. Took that with him. And they put it down. He puts it under his tent. So that's what was devoted unto Jehovah. Now, what was the consequence of taking the devoted thing? Yeah. Jared? David?
God said it would bring a curse to the people of Israel. In the next chapter, we see exactly what happened.
Yeah.
36 men died.
And we can take Ai with about 2,000 or 3,000. I think we can take it. And they get run away, and it resulted in Achan being stoned to death, who also was stoned to death that day. We'll get to this later, but we just hit the highlights. Who's that? I don't see his mother. I don't see his wife been put to death, but his sons and daughters were. Maybe he didn't have a wife at that time. Here's where older sons and daughters. But he said, no, he just stoned him. He stoned them. Who's the them? I think that would be the family. But I don't read where the wife was. He may not have had a wife, but at this time. But those were the things that all of their oxen, all the things that they took. And of course, a lot of that was supposed to be burnt. But all the stuff he had now, whether that came from there, I don't know. But all of his possessions he had, even his tent, he burned them, and they stoned them, they burned them, and they piled stones heap upon them as they just sanctify the land, far as God is concerned. And until then, as David says, we've got chapter 7 to go through what indeed is going to be the consequence. That's what trouble means, Israel. And that's what God wanted them to see. You're not holy toward me. And that's what he wants, is a holy people. What was Joshua's curse on Jericho? Did he do it in the form of an oath? We've been talking about oaths in James on Sunday morning. An oath, or he charges them with an oath. This is a solemn promise that if whoever tries to rebuild Jericho, when they rebuild that foundation, what's going to cost him? The death of his eldest son, firstborn. When he builds the gates, what's it going to cost him? His youngest. Did that happen? Was that something that did ever come to pass? Go down history a little bit. In the days of Ahab, you got Hiel, 1 Kings 16:34, who was from Bethel. That's not far from Ai and so forth in Jericho area. And he rebuilt it. He laid the foundation thereof, and his eldest son, it cost him his life, and the youngest one. But they had Jericho. Now, by the time Jesus comes along, there's an old Jericho and a new Jericho, according to people who have put together the history. That indeed the older city, that's why they're coming in and out and going back into Jericho. They went out from the older one to the newer one. Maybe that's a possibility we have there. But on this occasion, in the days of Ahab, worship of Baal, all those ungodly things, they did that, but it cost him. That indeed, years in advance, this promise comes true. That indeed cost them some more dearly of their oldest son and the youngest one. That when he tried to rebuild that. All right? We're looking at the book of Joshua, and here now we're going to be seeing Ai. You've got Gibeon. Gibeonites are going to figure out here how they're going to survive, and they deceive Joshua, and they go for it. Gilgal is where they've been encamping, to get you an idea of how far away from Jerusalem. 10 to 12 miles difference between Jerusalem and Ai, and then Jericho is about 10 miles away from there. And then you've got all these other places where the kings are. Hebron, Eglon, they're going to now try to eliminate Israel after these events take place. So here they're coming in as they conquer, they go through Jericho, that's the center of the promised land, and they go into the center part. And then they start dealing with the southern area where they're going to take care of the north as they're heading west in order to inhabit the land that God has promised them. Any questions that you might have or comments you want to add to lesson 2 before we go into lesson 3? All right. What was Achan's sin? We've been talking about him, and now we begin to see that here the city is, Ai should have been taken. And just to kind of bring us up to date, there were about 2,000 or 3,000 men go up and smite them. That's about all we need to do, is what the spies set out to do. And so they the people set about 3,000 men, and they went before the men of Ai. And the men of Ai smote them about 36 men. And they chased them from before the gate, even unto Shebarim, and smote them at the descent of that particular mountain. And the hearts of the people melted and became as water. So what does Joshua do when he responds to this? What does he do? He rent his clothes, fell the earth upon his face before the ark of Jehovah until the evening. He and the elders of Israel, they put dust upon their heads. And would you have ever thought Joshua, let me stand like Joshua, would be in this place? And you first read it, I said, Joshua, weren't you the one that we can take this land? O Lord Jehovah, where hast thou at all brought the people over the Jordan to deliver us up in the hand of the Amorites to cause us to perish? You just lost 36 men. But Joshua wasn't used to being defeated. And you read this over and over and over again, your heart gets a little softer for Joshua. I'm upset with him. He's supposed to be my hero. That's what the Bible class teacher said. It's acting like the people, we're just like little, thank you. They're giants over there. We can't take it. But when you look at it, he said, you cause us to perish? Would that we had been content and dwelt beyond the Jordan. What's beyond the Jordan? We had the eastern side of this thing done. We've got 2.5 tribes over there. They're doing here. I've led them across this Jordan River. Maybe we should have stayed there. Sound like we should have gone back to Egypt. He was displeased with people like that. What's Joshua doing? O Lord, what shall I say after the Israel had turned their backs before their enemies? Is this a pride thing, Joshua? For the Canaanites and all the inhabitants of the land will hear of it, and will compass around and cut off our name from the earth. What wilt thou do for thy great name? That's a Moses. That's what Moses did a lot. God, don't completely destroy them. They don't do what your name is going to be exalted. And if your name is not going to be exalted if they are defeated. He was so, I think, surprised at what had happened. And Job said, Joshua, get up. Get thee up. Wherefore art thou thus fallen on thy face? Israel has sinned. And Joshua needs to know you will be defeated if you're going to remain in sin. We're going to have to weed out the sin. And that's what Joshua's leadership he does. He goes to his ground shocked and begins to think, are we going to perish now, God? All this work we've done? Maybe we should have just stayed on the east side of the Jordan River. And God, we're turning our backs on the enemy. How's that going to affect your good name, your all-powerful God? Appeals to who God is. And he wants God's name to be exalted. So I just think it's a short vow. I'm not upset with Joshua, but we don't usually see that in Joshua. We always talk about stand like Joshua. Well, he went to the ground with humility and having no answers to give, and yet he's supposed to lead those people. I feel for him at that moment. But he doesn't whimper from here. He gets up and he said, get off your face. There's sin here. And that's what's going to happen. So Achan's sin, we talk about what he has done. And so what were the consequences of this one sin? Family, so his family was stoned to death too. His sons and daughters, what he had, all the possessions. We talked about that. That was one sin. Ai was not defeated. 36 men died that day. And here was Achan, the one who had caused the trouble in Israel. What did God tell Joshua to do immediately after Joshua fell on his face before the ark of Jehovah? Get up. Get up, and you're going to have to find out what the problem is, because the reason being is that sin has entered the camp. And it takes us back to Jericho, of the events that are taking place. Who pointed out the guilty party? God does. You have them come before Jehovah. So Joshua in verse 16 rose early up in the morning and brought Israel nearby their tribes. They went tribe and family and household until they would get to the right man. So there's a family of Judah. He took the family of the Zerahites. He brought near the family of Zerahites man by man, and Zabdi was taken. He brought near his household man by man, and Achan, the son of Carmi, the son of Zabdi, the son of Zeri, of the tribe of Judah, was taken. And Joshua said unto Achan, my son, give, I pray thee, glory to Jehovah, the God of Israel, and make confession unto him, and tell me now what thou hast done, hide it not from me. It's kind of like zeroing in on somebody that you can't escape now. Just the way it happens shows you that God, we're going to get it down to this and this and this, and ends up being, he has no way to turn. To his credit, he admits it. I don't think what else he could do. And so that's who pointed out the guilt of God. Your sin will find you out, and he pointed that out. And who, how was the offender found out is by that process of being brought before Jehovah. Again, he knows us. He knows who the sinner is. But he exposed him to all the people. Now, question number 5. What were the steps in Achan's sin? Because he kind of gives us a little detail that we can say, this happens a lot of times when people sin. Yes, sir? Yeah, he saw, he coveted, he took. Then what did he do? He hid it. If I can hide it from man, I've hidden it from God. That didn't work, did it? That didn't work at all. You hid it from man. Joshua didn't know that was you. Other people didn't know it was you. But you did that. Now, in this process, just because he saw, when he coveted, we know what covetousness is a sin, and then he took. Where does the will come in? When he saw it? No, he desires it. You haven't done anything, you see something, you desire it. He coveted it, he gave in to that. And somewhere along that line, that will comes in where he ends up taking it. But it's after that, his will is just moving in what he's going to do next. But just being tempted doesn't mean that I've willed to sin. And I've turned my will over to I'm going to sin. I'm just tempted. But the process takes place there where he gives in, and somewhere along that line the will is there. Corey, you had hand up? Go ahead.
I mean, that goes right along with James 1:14, where you see each one is tempted when he's drawn away by his own desires and enticed. But desire is conceived to be first to sin, and sin, when it's full grown, brings forth death.
There's a process there. That's true. And he made a choice. In order to take it, all those things, his will is involved with that. But the first thing he saw it, lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh, pride of life, those things there. But he saw that. And those are the steps that he took. And then the foolishness of thinking, I will hide it away from the sight of men. I'll put it in the dirt under the tent of my tent. Nobody can see that. And that's what they're going to dig that up. And before they put him to death. But those are the steps. Can you hide anything from God? Isn't that foolish? He's the one that sees all. Everything's naked before his eyes. He sees that. And we've got to understand that in this process of sin where the devil gets us, he gets us to the point of seeing, to the point that we give in with our will to commit that sin. Covet. I want that desire myself more than anything else, so the next process is I'll take it. And then I'll hide it. His will is in full process of turning away from what God would have him to do. Only Achan was stoned to death for his sin. True or false? Thank you. False. And he said we stone him, but he stoned them. And some have said, well, the sons and the daughters had to come and see it, but they weren't stoned. And God wouldn't do that. That's how bad sin is. And burned them all, and heaped up the stones at the end of that. Were burned. Is that true or false? We at least answer that one. That's going to be true. And we'll pick up about the name of the Valley of Achor, and we'll start there next time, Lord willing. Any comments before the kids get here you want to make? Okay. Thank you for being here and coming. Thank you.